Welcome in, everybody. It's another edition of Wild and Wacky Wednesday here on Main Street Sports Today, presented by the Tennessee Orthopedic Alliance of Columbia. I'm David Wilson. That's my buddy Calvin White. Please be joining you on this lovely Wednesday here in the Mid-State. The sun is shining once again. I'm still wishing we had a little rain in the forecast just so my grass wouldn't look as dark as me. But nonetheless, here we are. So, Calvin, repping the A today. How we doing?
I'm doing good. It's cooled off a little bit here in Clarksville. Been a little cooler than it has been over the last couple of weeks, which is helpful when we're outside, uh, covering football each and every week. But after, me and Wade talked about it yesterday, after the all the rainstorms and lightning delays we had to cover football in last week, it feels nice just to have a little cool day with no rain.
Yes, that is true of all the times that we needed rain and wanted rain. Of course, it all came for us when we were on the sidelines on Friday night. Calvin, you got started up with Clarksville and Rossview. I never got started down in Brentwood with Green Hill visiting Ravenwood. We both finished on Saturday, um, but we had to weather some storms and some ominous clouds getting home on Friday night. But yeah, Saturday the weather really got chilly on the sidelines at Ravenwood once the sun went down. It feels good outside with the sun's being up, but once it gets to nighttime, I've started to throw on some longer pants and a jacket. Um, but as we move towards today on a Wednesday, we got a good show for you guys on tap in the second hour, our 320 segment. As always, we're looking forward to being joined by Heather Williams from WCYB TV out in Johnson City. She'll talk a little NASCAR with us as the NASCAR playoffs continues to roll on here in the round of 16. Um, as the round of 16 heads to Bristol Motor Speedway this weekend with the Bass Pro Night Shop race at Bristol Motor Speedway. So looking forward to getting Heather's perspective on that as the NASCAR Cup Series finishes up the round of 16 and tries to cut 4 drivers from its slate as it heads to the round of 12 next week. We'll also get into the grab bag in that 2 o'clock, or excuse me, that second hour, that 3 o'clock hour. Talk a little news and notes across MLB, NFL, WNBA, a little college football in there as well. Coming up here in our next segment, though, we'll be joined by our good buddy Caleb JARREAU. Once again, he's all reliable for us. If it's not broke, don't fix it. From the Daily Times out in Maryville, area in East Tennessee. We're going to talk a little Tennessee football as they defeated ETSU last week in their home opener at Neyland Stadium. They get ready for a big one this weekend with College Game Day on campus in Knoxville and the Georgia Bulldogs, the number 6 team in the country, coming to Neyland Stadium to take on the Tennessee Vols in prime time at 2:30 on ABC. We'll also get a little Braves, sadly, a little baseball chatter here at the end of this hour. So we got a great show on tap for you guys. Looking forward to being joined by Heather and Caleb once again. Calvin, let's say we get this thing and rolling and this party started with last night's results and today's schedule on the rundown.
This is the rundown.
Last night's scores across the TWA on some volleyball action across the courts, across the mid-state. All this is district action that I am bringing you, except for one. Last night it was Blackman picking up a 3-0 sweep over Rockvale. It was Eagleville in 1A picking up a sweep over Culleoka. It was Middle Tennessee Christian in Division II Single A picking up a sweep over Franklin Christian. It was Gallatin taking the sweep over Beach. It was Lebanon picking up a 3-1 win over Laverne in 4 sets. It was Summertown sweeping Lewis County 3-0. It was Lincoln County over Columbia 3-0 as well. It was Murfreesboro Central Magnet taking a victory over Marshall County in 4 sets. It was Siegel picking up a 3-0 sweep over Oakland. It was Providence Christian picking up a 3-0 sweep over the Webb School. It was Riverdale beating Shelbyville in a sweep 3-0 in non-district action. It was Cookville picking up a 3-0 sweep over Smyrna in Class 3A. It was White County picking up a 3 sets to 1 win over Stewart's Creek, also in Class 3A.
Looking at last night's girls soccer scores, BGA wins 4-3 over Franklin Road Academy. Cannon County wins 5-1 over Middle Tennessee Christian. Independence 11, Centennial 2. Clarksville Academy 4, Ezel Harding 1. Clarksville Northeast wins 6-0 over McEwen. Kirkwood wins 3-0 over Clarksville Northwest. Columbia wins 9-0 over Warren County. Cornersville 6-1 over Culleoka. DCA 8-1 over Friendship. University School of Nashville 9, Davidson Academy 3. Dixon County 8, Kenwood 0. Fairview 3-0 over Montgomery Central. Summit 2, Franklin 0. Columbia Academy 2, Franklin Christian 0. Grace Christian out of Franklin wins 1-0 over Providence Christian. Gallatin and Greenwood out of Kentucky tie at 1 apiece. Hillsboro wins 5-0 over Antioch. Lead Academy wins 4-0 over Kip Antioch Global. Wilson Central 9, Laverne 0. Lawson wins 10-0 over Glencliff. And Mount Juliet and Liberty Creek tie at 2.
It was Lincoln County picking up a 3-1 win over Zion Christian. It was Station Camp blanking Macon County 5-0 in district play. Richland 9-1 victors over Marshall County. It was John Overton picking up a 2-0 win over McGavock in district play. It was CPA 4, Merrill Heights 2. Brentwood defeats Nolensville in a Williamson County showdown 3-1 in district play as well. Oakland 3-0 victors over rival Riverdale, also district action right there. It was Ravenwood 2, Page 1. It was Harpeth Hall picking up a 3-0 victory over Pope John Paul II. It was Hendersonville blanking Portland 5-0. It was Siegel 2, Rockville 1 in district action. Up in Clarksville, Calvin had your coverage on this one. Be sure to tune in to Main Street Clarksville if you want a recap and a story on this one. It was Clarksville 4, Rossview 3. It was Shelbyville 3, Blackman 0. Cookville in district action defeats Smyrna 4-0. In the Robertson County showdown, it was Springfield 6, Greenbrier 1. Stewart's Creek picked up a 3-1 win last night over Lebanon in district play as well. Tullahoma 9, Blattle Creek 0. Valor Collegiate 4, Martin Luther King 0 as well. And then White County shut out Watertown last night 2-0. In Major League Baseball last night, it was the Blue Jays picking up a 4-3 win over the Astros last night in extra innings. The Cubs beat the Braves last night at Truist Park 6-1. Then at First Horizon Park last night in minor league baseball action, it was the Nashville Sounds all over the Gwinnett Stripers 8-1. In the W was the New York Liberty 75-66 victors over the Washington Mystics. It was the Indiana Fever defeating the Minnesota Lynx 83-72. It was Los Angeles Sparks defeating the Phoenix Mercury 88-83. It was Las Vegas Aces defeating the Chicago Sky 92-61. We'll have more coverage on that later in the grab bag. Aces, victors of 15 in a row. It was the Seattle Storm clinching a playoff spot last night with a 74-73 win over the Golden State Valkyries.
Only one game on the docket tonight in high school volleyball. Providence Christian is at Siegel at 6 p.m. In girls soccer, McGavock is at Springfield at 5 p.m. Sycamore hosts Creekwood at 6 p.m. and Hendersonville is at Beach at 7 p.m. In Major League Baseball, the Astros are at the Blue Jays. First pitch for that one is at 6:07 p.m. The Braves host the Cubs again tonight at 6:15. You can find that game on FanDuel Sports Southeast. The Gwinnett Stripers are traveling, play their second game with the Nashville Sounds at 6:35. And finally, in the WNBA, the Atlanta Dream travel to play the Connecticut Sun at 6 p.m. Ladies and gentlemen, those are your scores. That was your schedule, and that concludes today's rundown.
Our top story brought to you by the good folks down at Piggly Wiggly in Neely's Mill in Columbia. They serve lunch daily from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. They also offer hand-cut meats and everything is cost plus 10 at the cash register. Piggly Wiggly, Neely's Mill in Columbia. Presenting you our top story, and we got into it right there on the rundown with last night's results in the W. And after last night, the playoff field is set in the WNBA after the Seattle Storm clinched a playoff spot, the last one in the 18 playoff field, with a 74-73 win over the Golden State Valkyries. Some news and notes here that I wanted to get into really quickly with Calvin. First of all, we'll talk about the Golden State Valkyries, who were the losers last night. They became the first WNBA expansion team in history to clinch a playoff spot. They did that last week, clinching a playoff spot. Um, so, Calvin, first of all, before we get into Seattle and get into the rundown of the playoffs, how cool is it, would you say, for a expansion team in its first season as a team, first season as an organization, Golden State clinching a playoff spot?
Yeah, it's really cool, especially for a league like the WNBA that, before last year hadn't really um, had the uptick in attention that it's gotten over the last couple of years. So it's really cool to, along with that really good draft class that came out last year with Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese and Cameron Brink and all those players that uh, we kind of get a team to turn our attention to. Obviously, you mentioned a second ago the Aces have won 15 in a row. They've kind of been the standard in the WNBA for the last couple of years in terms of just being the most dominant team. But Valkyrie snuck into the playoffs. If you're in the playoffs, you've got a chance. So it'll be interesting to kind of follow the WNBA playoffs and see if they can make some noise in their first year.
Yeah, absolutely. They clinched the playoff spot last week with an 84-80 win over the Dallas Wings at the Chase Center. Um, Janelle Salem said, "A lot of people didn't believe in us, and it lights a fire in us. It's a good thing. It's just a start. It's better to start as underdog and prove it to everyone. I know the girls on the team have always been in this position. It's something that we are used to. I mean, we did it as we grew. We mentioned just the record on this show, well, with Calvin and I, the historic numbers that the WNBA has been putting up this year. And Golden State with the Valkyries in their first season at the Chase Center and San Francisco has contributed to that. They've broken several records throughout their first season. Became the first team in women's sports history to eclipse 15,000 season ticket deposits. It also led the league in attendance, selling out all 22 of its home games in the Chase Center, which seats over 18,000 people. So Golden State doing the good things in promoting women's basketball. And as Calvin said, the growth has continued to surge. Last night, it was the Seattle Storm defeating the Valkyries and clinching a spot in the playoffs. The WNBA playoff standings look like this, the playoff picture at the moment. Once again, all the 8 teams are finally guaranteed. The Los Angeles Sparks are the one team that's going to be missing out on that window. Right now, the Minnesota Lynx are the number one seed at 33-10. The Las Vegas Lady Aces, who are 29-14 on the season, continue to keep it rolling. They've won 15 in a row. They are the second seed. The Atlanta Dream were the number 3 seed as of right now. The Phoenix Mercury at 27-16 are the 4 seed. The New York Liberty with Stewie, 26-17. Golden State, as I mentioned, in the playoffs, 23-20. The Indiana Fever at 24-20, and the Seattle Storm rounding it out at 23-21. So, Calvin, the playoffs just around the docket. I believe there's just 2 regular season games left for most of these teams before the playoffs get underway. I know a lot of us are excited to see Nafisia, Brianna Stewart, Asia Wilson, all these stars that the WNBA has. Obviously, Caitlin Clark with the Indiana Fever, if she can ever get healthy and play. Have not heard anything unless I've been living under a rock on her availability as of right now for the playoffs. But, the WNBA has stars, and to see them in the postseason would be really cool. Last couple of years, it's been a New York versus Las Vegas Aces kind of battle. But I bet you the Minnesota Lynx have something to say with, Nafisia Collier, who's top 3 in the game for sure.
Yeah, the early to mid 2010s, the Lynx were the ones that were kind of running through the league with Maya Moore. Last couple of years, it's been, like you said, an Aces and Liberty battle. I did see it announced the other day that Caitlin Clark is going to be shut down for the rest of the season, so she will miss out on the playoff run. But like you mentioned, we've still got a lot of star power in the playoffs. Brianna Stewart, Asia Wilson, Sabrina Ionescu, players like those. So I feel like this is one of the years where the WNBA playoffs, not only the regular season but the playoffs have a lot more eyeballs on them than they have the last couple of years. So, barring another, um, Las Vegas or New York Liberty dominant run to a championship, it should be a pretty entertaining WNBA playoffs.
Yeah, there's nothing better than playoff basketball, whether it's in the WNBA or the NBA. So the level of intensity the focus, the playmaking, whatever vernacular you want to use, it heightens in the awareness and the moments get even bigger and get even deeper. So excited about the WNBA playoffs kicking off or tipping off rather here soon. Looking forward to having a good show here on Main Street Sports Today on the Wild and Wacky Wednesday. Coming up after the break, our buddy Caleb JARREAU from East Tennessee will join us to talk a little Tennessee football as they prepare for a big matchup, heavyweight matchup this weekend at Neyland Stadium as the Georgia Bulldogs come a calling to Knoxville, Tennessee. So stay with us here on Main Street Sports Today.
Got closer. All new Sportsbook, the latest gaming machines, live horse racing, and more. The Mid Gaming Hall, Kentucky Downs.
Winning just got closer.
Deep in a forest at Nashville Zoo, new creatures here for you to view. Phantoms graced in black and white swing high in trees of dappled light. In rocky crags, tall and steep, small antelopes with nimble feet. A wise old man with beard of white, a sentry perched on stony height. Amidst it all, a hunter lies, with coat of gold and steely eyes. A new adventure just for you. Leopard Forest at Nashville Zoo. Open now.
Busy bee, yeah, busy bee. If you need...
Hold on, y'all, hold on. I need to make a call. Hey, this is Brianna with Busy Bee. I'm giving you a call to let you know your technician is on his way.
833.
Busy bee. Guys, not yet. Not yet.
Busy bee, oh,
Now
busy
ready,
bee.
guys.
Call 775-7833.
Custom Stone Handlers supplies over 600 distributors and suppliers with quality stone products. Along with Riverstone, we produce and distribute over 100 building, landscape, and other bulk products. Our goal is to provide quality products, service, and partnerships to ensure our customers' success. We firmly believe the measure of any person or company is how you treat other people and customers. Give them a call at 931-490-4990 or visit CustomStoneHandlers.com.
Welcome back in. It is a Wild and Wacky Wednesday here on Main Street Sports Today, presented by the Tennessee Orthopedic Alliance of Columbia. I'm David Wilson. That's my buddy Calvin White. Pleased to be joined now by our good buddy Caleb JARREAU from East Tennessee. We're going back to the bullpen once again, 2 weeks in a row. All Reliable is back with us. So, Caleb, we appreciate you joining us here on a Wednesday to talk a little Tennessee football.
Yeah, I appreciate you calling me in from the bullpen. I need maybe some intro music, some flashing lights, even get the bullpen card out. We got to go all the way in on this.
Mark, we're going to have to jot down that note and get that on the docket here for Caleb. We'll get him some strobe lights or something like that so he can announce his presence with authority. Caleb, last week we talked going into the ETSU game of wanting to see multiple Tennessee players, star per se, and get a lot of reps for a lot of these valuable players. They did just that. They played all three quarterbacks this past weekend against the Buccaneers at Neyland Stadium. Joy Aguilar looked good once again as advertised. Jake Merklinger looked really good, 9 of 14 passing for 118, and then true freshman George McIntyre got in. So I know that's the long-winded statement, but just kind of give me your summation of that offense and what they looked like against, an inferior ETSU team.
Yeah, I think what impressed me the most is seeing the wide receivers. You had two guys go over 100 yards, and I think that at the end of the day, it was 14 guys maybe caught passes for the Tennessee offense. So I think it was good to see, them spread the wealth. And I mentioned it when I was on here, I think, but, Tennessee did what they were supposed to do against ETSU, which we haven't seen in recent years with some of the quarterback play and offensive inconsistencies, this Tennessee team do what they're supposed to do against inferior opponents. So I think it was good to see Tennessee take care of business and do what they needed to do against ETSU and then get a lot of those freshman reps. I think, you saw some good from those freshmen and kind of how the future is bright. But then you also saw reasons why the starters are who they are and not some of those younger guys. So, yeah, I think you saw what you needed to see. It was good to see a blowout and good to see Tennessee, do what it needed to do against ETSU because, some of these cupcake games, i.e. Florida, you don't see teams do what they need to do. So, obviously getting out of there with 72 points, program record for first downs and points is always fun and makes it interesting. So lots of scoring, lots of things going on. And, Tennessee seems to be rolling full momentum into this Georgia matchup this weekend.
Caleb, last week going into the ETSU game, we talked about how you still had a lot of questions surrounding the defense. Obviously, Tennessee's a lot more talented team than ETSU is, but did you get maybe some answers to some of your questions you had concerning Tennessee's defense in this one?
Yeah, I think that's a good question because, ETSU didn't cross the 50 and their first touchdown. I don't think they crossed 50 in the first half. And their first touchdown came on that fumble, which kind of put them in the red zone. So, or the errant snap, I guess, that you would rule a fumble. But, yes and no. I think Tennessee didn't play a lot of their starters a long time. And I think, ETSU is not that good of a test. I mentioned on here too that like their quarterbacks are veteran, and you saw Cade McNamara really, throw some seeds, especially in the second half, and thread some needles. But is there a lot to take away from that defense? I'm not really 100% sure. I think the big test will be this weekend, partially because you don't know what Georgia's identity is. But I do think it was good for Tennessee to get a lot of those freshman DBs in and get them playing in front of a crowd because with the way the depth is in that secondary right now, you're a couple rolled ankles away from, all freshmen playing cornerback. So I think it was good to see some of those young guys get in. I don't think you really answered the questions completely just because, of ETSU being the opponent they are and not having a lot of weapons on offense. So like I said, I think it was easy on Tennessee. They did what they were supposed to do. And you got a lot of freshmen that played a lot of reps. So I think the questions persist and you'll see a lot, this weekend with Georgia and then getting into SEC play as well.
Yeah, Caleb, you mentioned it right there. Just 216 total yards of offense for ETSU Saturday against Tennessee, just 49 yards rushing. So, Tennessee necessarily didn't have any turnovers, so they weren't turning them over per se, but they were really stingy. Obviously, ETSU was just 2 of 15 on third down. The task, though, becomes, as you kind of mentioned, much harder with the athletes that Georgia has on its perimeter with its outside and its receiving core. Obviously, a quarterback that it trusts in Gunnar Stockton. So, just kind of as we kind of start to preview and turn ahead to this Georgia game, I guess is that cornerback position not only something that you're focusing on, but obviously Kirby Smart and that Georgia offense on that Tennessee secondary that can probably be a little bit exploited now as this goes into its depth.
Yeah, and I think you're going to have to see this defense do what it kind of did in previous seasons, which is when your secondary isn't playing that good or you don't have depth, you have to get pressure on the passer. You haven't seen Gunnar Stockton in an environment like this. You haven't seen him really with a lot of pressure. And this Georgia offense does raise a lot of questions. Like, that Austin Peay game, Austin Peay had a goal line stop on Georgia, which is something that should not happen if you're a top 10 SEC college football team playing a team like Austin Peay. So, that raises some questions. Obviously, Gunnar Stockton, and I mentioned off the top, they don't really have an identity. You haven't seen much yet between games against Austin Peay and Marshall. And you're right. There's guys, if Gunnar Stockton has time and can really, get the ball out, then he's got guys he can throw to. Zachariah Branch is probably the one everybody's going to circle. But Georgia always has weapons on the outside. It's just a matter of in this game, I think they have to pressure the passer and make things uncomfortable for Gunnar Stockton. And kind of also just, make things busy in front of his eyes, like run the stunts that you saw against Syracuse that ended up in sacks, maybe bring a DB off an edge that kind of throws Gunnar Stockton off. Doing those type of things to keep him uncomfortable will help take some pressure off that secondary because, like I said, the depth is there. The depth is not there, I should say, and they're young in that secondary as well. But you've got talent. So at the end of the day, like this game is just going to be you got to win your ones. So if Tennessee's secondary can win their ones and then go on offense and their wide receivers get open, then Tennessee can come away with a win. But I think you got to get pressure on Gunnar Stockton. You have to make him uncomfortable because if he's comfortable, and I don't have a lot of faith in this Georgia offense. A majority of their passes, I think only 6 of their passes last weekend against Austin Peay or I think for the whole season as a whole, we're more than 9 yards away from the line of scrimmage. So they love to throw dink and dunk. They love to keep it close to the line of scrimmage. So you have to make Gunnar Stockton uncomfortable and take away that deep ball, and kind of, if you can shorten the field and keep everything in front of you as the Tennessee defense. I think you mentioned it last week, the bend but don't break strategy. Keep everything in front of you. The game can be won. It's when you start losing those one-on-ones, guys are wide open, and Gunnar Stockton's just sitting in the pocket comfortable, that you're going to have issues. So I think you have to make him uncomfortable, one, and then that'll take some stress off your secondary, because right now with Colton Hood and Ty Redmond, I think you're comfortable where you are with those two guys. It's just a matter of, throughout a game when they get tired or you have to bring substitutions in, what does that look like?
Caleb, Tennessee hasn't beaten Georgia since 2016. The famous Josh Dobbs to Jawan Jennings play. And, this is the earliest this game's going to be played since, I believe, 1995. And, you mentioned, Georgia starting the year with Marshall and Austin Peay. Now, obviously, Tennessee hasn't played, two tough opponents at this point either. But do you think that, with this being this early in the season, that Tennessee could, maybe catch Georgia off guard and maybe pull off a win against Georgia, especially with this game being in Knoxville?
Yeah, I think playing early definitely helps. Because you think back to like some Georgia's, earlier season games as well, like Kentucky when they went on the road and laid an egg and almost lost that game. Like Georgia, you don't know what Georgia has. They have a new offense, new quarterback. They're going to have the same, 4-star, 5-star guys in the trenches, same guys on the outside. But this game being early, I think, does help in the same way that I guess it would hurt Tennessee as well. I mean, you have less to prepare for and you don't know what to expect. But I agree with you. I think obviously being in Neyland helps, especially when you're welcoming a quarterback like Gunnar Stockton in, who's a younger guy, who doesn't, really have a grasp for what's happening yet, I would say, in SEC football, and you don't know what to expect out of him. So I think when you put all of that in, that can play into Tennessee's hand. But at the same time, like Joey Aguilar has never played. He's played a couple ACC opponents, but he's never played an SEC game either. He's never been in front of an actual loud Neyland Stadium with 102,000. College game day is going to be in town. He's never had that much attention. I'm sure he's done a ton of media this week. It's going to be a nationally televised game on ABC. So you can say the same thing about Tennessee, truthfully, as well. And, we've talked a lot, like the offensive line impressed against Syracuse and ETSU, and the running backs look good. But what happens when those guys start blocking, 5-star defensive linemen and some of the best guys in the SEC? So I think playing early in the year helps and hurts, kind of the same way for both teams, to where at the end of the day, you have to do what you're good at. So if Tennessee, stretches the field and starts getting the deep ball in play, all of a sudden that game can swing in Tennessee's favor. But if you look up in the third quarter and Tennessee hasn't gotten the deep ball working at all, and Georgia's able to load the box and keep everything close, and it plays in the Georgia's hand, then it'll be a Georgia win. So I think you hear coaches talk about all the time, like earlier in the year, you have to do what you're good at. And I think this game will just be about whatever team imposes their will, on the other the best.
Caleb JARREAU of the Daily Times out of East Tennessee joining us here on Main Street Sports Today, presented by the Tennessee Orthopedic Alliance of Columbia. Caleb, I think you just kind of hit the nail on the head, for me at least. I think if we're talking on Monday around the water cooler about a big Tennessee win and another program-defining win for Josh Heupel, that it's the Tennessee's offense that was the one that got it over the hump, per se. I think we have a good idea that this Tennessee defense can hang with Georgia, per se, specifically considering the struggles they had last week against Austin Peay, moving the football and sustaining drives and scoring. So maybe give me somebody on that offense outside of the quarterback position and Joey Aguilar, that if we're talking on Monday about a big-time Tennessee win, that stepped up and made plays when it mattered most against a really good Georgia defense, led obviously by Kirby Smart, who's a multinational champion, former defensive coordinator, obviously Alabama under Nick Saban. So coming from a rich pedigree.
Yeah, I think, wide receiver is the one I have circled, because those guys can win their one-on-ones and stretch the field. Then all of a sudden, that Tennessee's offense is run first, but it all, is based off of having wide splits. And if you're not threatening at all with the pass game, like 2022 is a good example of Tennessee went into Athens and had a strong chance to win that game, fired up offense, but Kirby Smart just played man-to-man defense. Like if you lock down Tennessee's wide receivers in a man defense and you're able to load the box and play the run, Tennessee's offense struggles to go. But so I think if you look up, this weekend, and guys like, Mike Matthews and Braylon Staley were wide open, and your longest play of the game is like an 80-yard touchdown pass, then I think you'll know Tennessee either was at least close or won the game if that's the case. And I think you'll look and see, strong stats on the ground as well. Because at the end of the day, if Tennessee's has that threat of the deep ball, which keeps you from loading that box, then they're able to run the ball as well. And we've seen with this, three-headed monster of a running back room that they can run the ball really efficiently. So I think at the end of the day, for Tennessee to win this game, you have to have that deep ball in play. You have to stretch the field, because if Georgia's just able to man up and take away any threat of the pass and then load the box and stop the run game, you can't get anywhere. So it all starts with that. And I think every time we've seen Tennessee face off with Georgia, Georgia's had Tennessee's number because they're able to, guard the three ball, or not guard the three ball, but guard the deep ball and load that box, because that's all this Tennessee offense is, truthfully, at its, basis is we're going to run the ball because the box is going to be light, because you have to have safety help down the field to keep us from throwing the deep ball over top. So I think that's what I would lean with, is if Tennessee's able to get that deep ball working, keep a light box and be able to run the ball, it'll probably end a lot differently than the last, few Georgia games have, because that's all Georgia's been able to do is, hey, you think your receivers are good? Well, here's a 5-star cornerback that's going to man you up the whole game. And we're going to blitz down your throat, so that way you don't even have time to throw the deep ball if you want. So I think it all just goes hand in hand with that Georgia defense has had Tennessee's number.
Caleb, Jermon McCoy and Ricky Gibson have already been ruled out for this week. You talked about it a little bit with this week's pass game against ETSU, but, Georgia, obviously they haven't been known as kind of a team that will beat teams through the air over the last couple of years. Gunnar Stockton, he threw for 230 against Austin Peay, but, really hasn't had an outstanding performance through the air so far. Have you seen enough out of the Georgia offense to where Tennessee not having Jermon McCoy and Ricky Gibson could potentially be a problem for that defense?
I think yes and no. I think, not for part, yes, obviously Georgia is very talented. So not having those guys on the field hurts. But I think on the other hand, not having them is not a surprise for Tennessee. You went into this week, Ricky Gibson's going to be a pretty lengthy injury, and then Jermon McCoy is coming off the ACL. I would have been shocked. I would have been shocked if Jermon McCoy's first game back was, the hornet's nest of Georgia. Like, I think that's a guy you have to ease in. And even then, if he was playing this week, he wouldn't, play a full game if I had to bet. So I think, yes, it's a problem because Georgia's very talented on the outside. I already mentioned Zachariah Branch. But I also say no because they didn't expect to have those guys this week. So it's not really as a, knife to the heart as you would expect for most injuries, because Tennessee's kind of already planning to not have those guys. So I think that's one spot you need to watch. And like I mentioned earlier, you have to pressure the passer and put some guys in front, move some things around in front of Gunnar Stockton, first-time starter, get fancy, disguise coverages to confuse him the entire game. Because if he's uncomfortable and the passing game isn't working, it really simplifies a lot of things for that Tennessee offense. And I think playing a Nealon will help too, because if he's confused and uncomfortable and now you can't even hear yourself think, that's going to make it hard on a quarterback. So I think you just have, at the end of the day, you have to make him uncomfortable and keep this offense out of sync, and hopefully you score some points, because, if Georgia isn't scoring and you're not scoring, then it's going to once again play into Georgia's hand, because they love to play an ugly brand of football, where it's just all about getting in the trenches and not high scoring. So, but yeah, so I guess it's twofold there, Calvin. We're you're not surprised you don't have those guys, but there are really talented players for Georgia that kind of make you wish they were on the field.
Caleb, this feels like one of those obvious duh statements, but this seems like a really big swing game for Tennessee when it comes to its schedule and its hopes of obviously making another college football playoff. You look at their schedule. If they win this one this weekend at Neyland against Georgia, where they're a home dog by 3.5 points according to ESPN, they move to 3-0 in its season. The next 3 games are home versus UAB, at Mississippi State, which looks a little tougher now after they defeated Arizona State, and then a home game versus Arkansas, where Tennessee is going to be a favorite before they head down to T-Town and Tuscaloosa on October 18th. So if they can get this one, Caleb, it feels like they're right there in that mix of, once again, of, looking at the rest of their schedule after Alabama, at Kentucky, home versus a really good Oklahoma team, then New Mexico State, Florida, which we have question marks now after their loss to USF, and then Vanderbilt. So if they can get this one, Caleb, it feels like they have a really good chance, if things go their way the rest of the year, to find themselves in the playoff hunt once again, which, after the saga with Nico and Josh Heupel earlier this year, it seemed like an afterthought per se, but it's right there in front of them if they play what they're capable to.
Yeah, I agree. I think, everybody, including myself, kind of had Tennessee at that 9-3, 8-4 mark, and all of a sudden, the teams that you expected Tennessee to lose to aren't looking good, and the teams you expected Tennessee to beat, look a little better than expected. So I think if you beat Georgia, it's obviously a feather in your cap and another, program win for Josh Heupel. But to your point, like, all of a sudden the schedule looks a lot easier because Georgia's probably, I would say, the hardest opponent Tennessee has on the schedule. That trip to Tuscaloosa, Tennessee hasn't played well in road games, but Alabama, sure, they get up for big games, but they haven't looked good and lost to Florida State, and their program is kind of, on the downward trend now. Oklahoma's a weird one. They come in Neyland Stadium, but all of a sudden John Mateer and the Sooners look really good. That road trip to Florida, what does Florida look like in November? What does your program look like in November? That's a questionable one. So it does make the picture a lot clearer if you beat Georgia, because not only do you get some room for error, which I think is kind of what you're hinting at, but also, you have a lot of confidence. You beat a good football team. So I think that would be big just for a schedule standpoint and season standpoint. And truthfully, I just think it like I said, it gives you room for error to still make the playoff, because if you go on the road and lose to Alabama, the storyline is going to be, beat Georgia at home, upset Georgia at home, but lost to a good Alabama team on the road. Okay, that's a quality loss. But if you lose to Georgia, lose to Alabama, lose to Florida, maybe lose to Oklahoma, beat Oklahoma, it becomes a lot tougher to make the playoffs when you have no signature wins, which I think is what kind of hurt Tennessee last year to an extent as well, where, you're claiming Alabama was your big win last year, but it was a lot of teams. So I think, you need a signature win, especially with all the turmoil around the playoff and how many SEC teams get in and all the storylines you see every day. This would be a signature win, in week 3 of the season. So you can easily stack more wins onto that and build that resume. And then to your point too, like if you lose to Georgia, but get to the end of the year and beat an Alabama or beat an Oklahoma, beat a Florida, now you can use the excuse that, oh man, that Georgia game was on September 13th, first SEC game for Joey Aguilar. It's a very different team now. So I think you can play it both ways. But man, if you get a Georgia win in week 3 and have that on your college football playoff resume, not a lot of teams can say they would have that at the end of the year.
Caleb, I've seen a lot of people, talk about how Georgia's biggest weakness right now is that offensive line. We talked about it last week with Tennessee. One of their questions on defense was depth on the defensive line. Do you think that those two storylines can kind of play into each other this week? Do you think that, even without that depth on the defensive line that Tennessee, is lacking at the moment, do you think they can still maybe find a way to get to Gunnar Stockton and affect the quarterback?
Yeah, I think you're going to have to scheme some things up. I don't think, I think last year was a good example of Tennessee was able to, get pressure with just your 4 defensive linemen. I think this year, especially against a team like Georgia, you're going to have to scheme some things up, make some things look weird, have linebackers bluff and then back off, but then maybe one play have them actually blitz, bring a DB off the end. You're going to have to do something special to get that pressure on Gunnar Stockton, because I question the defensive line depth, and a lot of these guys aren't tested. So, maybe you do have some gamers on that defensive line who play up to competition and will play good against Georgia. I think luckily you'll probably have Jackson Moy back this weekend if all things go well. So that will help. But you've got depth per se and just bodies. You just don't know who can do what. So I think, it doesn't give you a lot of confidence to roll out an untested defensive lineman against Georgia, but I think they have guys who something's going to have to stick. So if it's just like, throwing noodles at the wall and see if something happens, like, then that's what you have to do. But I think you're going to have to scheme some things up to get some pressure on Gunnar Stockton. You've got guys who can. I mean, like Edwin Spillman has impressed me this season just with his speed and the way he's able to attack the ball. Arian Carter's another guy who can really get after the ball in the blitz. Bring a DB, maybe you put Boo Carter out there at the star position and have him attack the passer. Like, you got to do something special to help that defensive line, because like you said, the depth is questionable. And, we didn't see a lot against ETSU because they probably weren't out there as long, but like Syracuse, not only was your depth question, but you had guys in and out the entire game, with injury. So you don't want that to happen against Georgia. But on the flip side too, like I think we have to, question the Georgia offensive line, because I think they've been banged up with injuries. The right side of their offensive line is a little questionable, which, is obviously never good. But I wonder what their offensive line looks like in an environment like Neyland Stadium, because, it's still Georgia football. These guys are still really good and one of the best teams in college football. But you have to question, is this the same Georgia offensive line you've seen that under Kirby Smart has won these championships? Because it seems to be there's a little bit of wavering there. And when you talk to people around Athens or people who cover the program, the confidence level that's always sky high with the trenches is maybe a little bit lower this year with that offensive line. So, to your point, Calvin, maybe you can get some Neyland Stadium magic to help too, and get Georgia behind the chains. A couple offensive linemen get uncomfortable, get scared, and then once you have Georgia uncomfortable, then you're really able to put your foot on the gas, because while Tim Banks has had to play bend but not break defense at times, he's a guy that loves to get after the passer and really put his foot on the gas when they're in plus situations. So I think if all goes well, Georgia's uncomfortable in offense, and then Tim Banks is really able to empty the playbook, scheme some things up, and hopefully play to win the game and not play to not lose.
Should be a good one on Saturday, primetime, ABC, 3:30 Eastern time on the banks of the Tennessee River at Neyland Stadium. College Game Day also on site. Last time College Game Day was there, I believe, was 2022. Pat McAfee and Peyton Manning were leading the band before the game in College Game Day, so looking forward to that. Caleb, appreciate you joining us. I hope maybe I see you on College Game Day. Maybe you can be the kicker in the contest per se and win some money for a bunch of students. I know they pick a kid, but I'm sure that would be something that you would do back in the day.
Hey man, I don't know if I can kick.
30 yards? Is it 30 or 40?
I think it's 30.
It's 30.
But that kid last week, did you see the kid last week? He scammed us.
Nailed
he
it.
was like, "Oh, I've never kicked before. I've never done this." He went out there with a lefty swing and nailed it. So with cleats on too. I don't know if I have that in me. The best I can do is, the little fan fests from the SEC championship when I was like 7. I'd kick the little field goal in the big goal posts and, feel like I was the best ever. But I don't think I have it anymore.
The problem is when you got an environment like that at Tennessee, finding somebody sober enough to kick it I know it's early in the morning per se, but they're going to be rowdy and ready to go. That's Caleb JARREAU of Daily Times out in East Tennessee, joining us here for the second week in a row on Main Street Sports Today, presented by the Tennessee Orthopedic Alliance of Columbia. Caleb, once again, thank you for taking some time on your Wednesday to join us and talk a little Tennessee football.
Yep, I appreciate it, fellas.
All right, that is Caleb. Coming up after the break here on Main Street Sports Today, we'll talk a little baseball and get into some MLB news and notes across the league right after this here on Main Street Sports Today. So stick with us.
Columbia Power and Water Systems is dedicated to bringing our customers reliable local service. Whether you're turning on a light switch, your faucet, or streaming on TV, our dedicated team members from here in Murray County work every day to keep you on. If you need us, call us 931-388-4833 or visit cpws.com. CPWS, local service, local support.
Zion Christian Academy at zioneagles.org or 931-388-7531. You can schedule your appointment to visit their beautiful campus. Again, zioneagles.org or 931-7531 to schedule your visit today.
This day in Braves history, September 10th, 2003, Braves catcher Javi Lopez blasts his 39th home run of the season in the bottom of the second inning off Phillies starter Vincent Padilla. Lopez's solo shot was the 216th homer for the Braves in the 2003 season, breaking a previous franchise record. The Braves go on to win that game 4-2, with Horacio Ramirez getting the start for the Bravos, pitching 7 innings of 6 hit ball and 2 runs with 7 strikeouts. That was this day in Braves history, September 10th, 2003. Seems like every time we come here on a Wednesday afternoon, Calvin and I are breaking down another Braves loss. And that's what happened last night as Truist Park at the Chicago Cubs even the 3-game series with a 6-1 win over the Braves last night. It was rookie Cade Horton get the ball for the Cubbies and tossing 6.1 innings pitch, a 4-hit, 1-run ball against the Braves. Spencer Strider taking the loss for the Braves, who maneuvered around a rough and long first inning to toss 6 innings of 6 hits, two earned runs, and 8 strikeouts. So not a bad line for Spencer Strider, but another night where the Braves offense just couldn't get going against obviously Cade Horton's a really good young arm who's right there in the mix with Braves rookie Drake Baldwin for Rookie of the Year. So just not the night that the Braves wanted, excuse me. Cade Horton only had 2 strikeouts. So he was pitching in contact per se and recording some outs, but the Braves just not able to capitalize as they dropped the second game of the series to the Chicago Cubs, Calvin. And, we're down to less than 20 games left on the MLB schedule, at least for the Braves. So I know we're all counting down the days to where this season and kind of a nightmare season gets over with.
Yeah, Wade and I talked about this yesterday. When the Braves won on Monday, and we talked about it yesterday, we were talking about how, the Braves obviously aren't going to make the playoffs, but you can still kind of find a little entertainment in this season if the Braves were able to kind of find a way to throw a wrench in some other playoff teams' plans. If it looks like the Cubs are, they've got a shot at winning 90 games this year. If the Braves can kind of stymie them a little bit heading into the playoffs, and pick up as many wins as they can. Yeah, they're just trying to put as many good notes on the end of this season as they can. Going into the off season, they'll just try to get everybody healthy and regroup for next year.
Yeah, it never feels good when you get to this point of the year where other teams are potentially looking to be popping some champagne in your locker room per se. And so, looking at the Braves schedule, they wrap up with Washington and Pittsburgh. So maybe not teams per se that are playing with something on the line in that last homestand of the year. But the Braves here playing Houston up on this upcoming homestand, Wade's Astros, who we'll get into here in just a minute. Maybe looking to thwart their attempt at the AL West. The Braves going on the road here on their next road trip to play Detroit. So, yeah, as you mentioned, kind of maybe trying to ruin some seeding plans for these opposing teams. But last night, Ronald Acuna Jr. DH'd for the Braves and batted 7th. And this is a topic that's been coming up here more recently on a Major League Baseball Network over the last couple nights. Ronald was 2 for 3 with a double and 1 run scored. He scored the lone Braves run on a RBI single by Jerkson Profar in the 3rd inning. And our producer Mark has a clip that Calvin I would like for you to listen to, and we'll discuss after it plays in its entirety. So listen to this clip. This is Dan Plesac, Harold Reynolds, and Greg Amsinger prior to Monday's contest between the Braves and Cubs.
28 in December, and they won a world championship without him. Remember, he was hurt for the whole year. They won a World Series. He's got a club-friendly contract. It's so club-friendly, you wonder if he's still happy with it. What is it, $17 million he's owed next year?
Is he gonna move
next year, $17 million. Then they have 2 club options for $17 million. If you wanted to trade Ronald Acuna Jr.,
wow,
you'd have a lot of takers.
Absolutely.
You would get a haul in return for Ronald Acuna Jr.
Greg, you might think I'm crazy, but did I not say that All-Star break? I traded. Everybody thought I was nuts. But that's how you flip your organization around. If you're going to put him at 6th and 7th in the lineup, that is destroying the player, and that ain't helping your team at all.
Well, it's not making him happy.
No way. I just don't understand sometimes how we shuffle. This guy did everything MVP, best player at top of the order. So he comes back from injury, everything else. He's not getting there going. So let's put him in an uncomfortable position in the lineup. We'll put him at 7th. Oh, we'll move him to 6th. No, you put him at 1st. Your team is going nowhere.
That's 100% right.
As you go, Ronald.
If you value Ronald Acuna Jr., his happiness and him finding it again should be the #1 priority for the rest of this season.
Period.
Winning games doesn't really matter anymore.
But instead, and this is, it's fact, Profar goes out on a suspension, and you come back and treat him better than you do Ronald Acuna. Oh, you're going to hit first. Jerkson's really swinging the bat. He's going to stand in one spot. I'm sorry. Once Ronald Acuna comes back, he is the leadoff hitter of the Braves, period.
Wow.
You can go ahead and stop it,
Maybe
Mark.
A little soap opera in the ATL.
That's just how.
Calvin, I want to get your thoughts on that, but I'm gonna disclose mine first. This is something that I discussed with Mo when I saw the video on Monday, and I've saved it up. I pinted it up for this moment. I'm gonna say this first of all, to the first part of Harold's and Greg's statement. The Braves did not win a World Series technically without Ronald Acuna Jr. He played for the first 80-something games of that season and was an MVP candidate prior to tearing his ACL on a fly ball down in Miami. Let me put that right there. So it was not the Braves going the whole entire season without winning a World Series without Ronald Acuna Jr. If Ronald Acuna does not play during the first half of that 21 season, the Braves are not in position to win the World Series. So that's my first statement there. The second statement I do somewhat agree with. Ronald Acuna Jr. is not a 6 or 7 hitter in the Braves lineup. He needs to either be hitting first or he needs to be hitting third. He preferably hits first. You're not doing the player a disservice, or the team for that matter, a disservice or service, by hitting him 6th or 7th. With that being said, Braves fans were furious, to say the least, upset that Freddie Freeman walked away during free agency. Now imagine their feeling with their favorite player, the best player on the Braves team, being traded by this organization. That cannot happen. And I don't believe that ever will happen. So we need to stop this talk right there. I feel like it's nonsense to discuss. The Braves will lose a big portion of the people that walk through that gate if they trade a superstar of the caliber of Ronald Acuna Jr. So I guess that was my initial thoughts. Why are we continuing to have these conversations? The Braves are not going to do that. Alex Anthopoulos has told you that he's not going to trade somebody who is under team control, specifically with Ronald making $17 million for the next couple of years. So, Calvin, feel free to continue and go.
Yeah, I mean, they made it sound like the 2021 Braves, won 115 games and rolled their way to the World Series. If, like you said, if Ronald doesn't play the first half of that year, they barely squeaked into the playoffs as it was. If they don't have Ronald for that a little over that first half of the season, they definitely don't make it in. And I also don't understand the part that Harold was talking about, getting a haul for Ronald to potentially flip the organization. I mean, this was outside of shortstop. It's almost the exact same lineup that won over 100 games 2 seasons ago. Outside of Orlando Arcia not being over there at shortstop, it's basically the entire team just having a season-long cold streak. Obviously, Ronald was hurt for a little bit. Austin Riley's been in and out of the lineup. Ozzie Albies hasn't had a really great season, but like you said, it's kind of a similar situation to Derrick Henry with the Titans. The Titans didn't trade Derrick Henry per se, but they also didn't make it a known plan to re-sign him, and so it's never good for fans when you let your star player walk or trade him when they obviously have a lot left in the tank. Now, Ronald's coming off of 2 major knee surgeries, and so obviously they want to keep him healthy for as long as they can. And like they said, his happiness is priority. Obviously, I think that Ronald said it multiple times that he wants to be in Atlanta, but that kind of goes 2 ways. Atlanta needs to want him too, and so
we want him. I want him.
Yeah,
that's all that matters. I want him.
Yeah, and so They were talking about his contract. I think Atlanta needs to do whatever they need to do to lock up Ronald Acuna Jr. for the rest of his career, as long as Atlanta's where he wants to be.
He needs to be a Brave for life, period. And that's my last comment on that situation tonight. Rubber match between the Braves and the Cubs down at Truist Park, 6:15, as Calvin mentioned, Central Time first pitch. Jamison Tyon, who's 9-4 in the season with a 4.15 ERA, taking on Braves ace left-hander Chris Sale, coming back his third start from injury, 5-4 in the season with a 2.38 ERA, your reigning National League Cy Young winner. Last night, as we mentioned in the rundown, is the Toronto Blue Jays picking up a 4-3 win over the Houston Astros up in extra innings. Last night, north of the border, Houston now holds a one-game lead over Seattle in the AL West. That one is going to come down to the last week of the season. Game 2 up in Toronto is at 6:07 Central Time. That'll be Jason Alexander taking the ball for the Astros, who's 4-1 with a 4.68 ERA on the season, taking on Jose Barrios, who is 9-5 with a 4.02. Some news and notes really quickly as we butt up against the second hour here of Main Street Sports Today. Last night, Philadelphia Phillies DH Kyle Schwarber continued his tear season and knocked his 50th home run of the season, and the Phillies win over the Mets, who continue to reel. The Mets are getting caught by the Giants and the Reds in that race for the final wild card spot in the National League. Schwarber joined 2008 World Series champion and former first baseman Ryan Howard with the Phillies. His only Phillies players reached 50 home runs in a season. Howard hit 58 back in 2006. You got to think there's been a lot of great players come through that Philadelphia organization, including Mike Schmidt, who's a Hall of Famer. The most he had was 48 back in 1980. He is now 3 home runs away. Schwarber talking behind Cal Raleigh for the major league lead, who has 53 big blasts on the year.
Yeah, I'm going to mention this like we did when we talked about Bobby Witt Jr. a couple weeks ago. Shout out to Kyle Schwarber for carrying my fantasy baseball team this year. That big 4 home run game he had against the Braves last week or the week before got me some big points for the team, for my 5-win fantasy baseball team. But yeah, Kyle Schwarber, it's hard to think that whenever Kyle Schwarber came up, he was such a big part of that Cubs core that won the World Series. And now, I think I saw something a couple weeks ago. He's been on teams that aren't the Cubs as long as he was on the Cubs. And so, like, he's played for, 4 or 5 teams already, but, he's been DHing out of the leadoff spot for forever now. And he's going to be one of those guys that when we look on after he retires, we're going to look back on his career, and he's going to be like a career 220 hitter, and he's going to have 500 home runs, and the Hall of Fame voters are going to lose their minds because they don't know what to do with him. But he's been one of the best power hitters in the game for a long time.
Yeah, from one playoff team in the Philadelphia Phillies to another. Kind of crazy to think with all the turmoil that was going on in spring training with this group. The Boston Red Sox last night down in across the country in Sacramento, and it was Red Sox left-hander Connolly early in his major league debut, striking out 11 in 5 shutout innings as he earned his first major league win as the Red Sox defeated the A's 6-0 in Sacramento. He's called up from AAA Worcester earlier in the day and got the start for the injured Dustin May. Probably goes out and strikes out 11. The 23-year-old left-hander just allowed 5 hits, including striking out ace slugger Nick Kurtz for his first strikeout. So Calvin, major league debut, 11 Ks and a win. Can't get much better than that.
No, I can't get much better than that, and I'm sure that's something he's going to remember for a long time. Don't see many big league debuts like that. And to have one like that this late in the season for not a great Red Sox team, but one that's kind of been straddling the line between bad and good for most of the year. Heck of a debut for him.
Mark, really quickly, just giving you a heads up. I'm going to save the managers and GMs on the move note for a grab bag. I'm just going to hit the injuries here really quickly, Mark. We mentioned last week when the Braves were up in Wrigley Field that Kyle Tucker got injured with a calf strain. He has been officially placed on the 10-day injured list by the Chicago Cubs. Cubs manager Craig Counsell confirmed that Tuesday for the game versus the Braves. He said than it was yesterday. Yesterday was a really good day. He just didn't make any progress today. He wasn't comfortable playing, so we said we have to give this a little more time. Tucker is hitting a team leading 270. It has batting average with an 854 OPS. It has 22 home runs in his first season with the Cubs. Obviously, got traded over from the Astros this offseason. He's going to be a free agent this year, so that is something to watch. Another start player that landed on the injury list, this one for the AL East, leading Toronto Blue Jays, a shortstop and another guy who's going to be a free agent at the end of the year, Bo Bichette, was placed on the 10-day injured list with a knee injury, retroactive to September 7th. Bichette leads the majors with 181 hits here, 44 doubles, and ranks third in average with a 311 clip. He was injured in the sixth inning of Saturday's loss at Yankee Stadium. So another guy who is going to get paid this offseason going on the injured list. So hopefully Bo can get ready for the Blue Jays as they look to clinch the AL East here soon and make a run in a wide open AL playoff picture. Then lastly here in our MLB chatter segment, last night down at First Horizon Park, it was the Nashville Sounds moving to 77-60 on the year. They defeated the Gwinnett Stripers and right-hander Giancarlos Laria last night with an 8-1 victory at First Horizon Park. They will continue this afternoon on a Wednesday, a winning Wednesday. So fans of the Sounds win tonight, you will run the bases. So all that is going on our MLB chatter segment. Once again, Mark, I'm going to save that managers and GMs on the move for our grab bag. That will happen just right out after the break here on a wild and wacky edition of Main Street Sports Today. So stick with us.
Jones & Lang Sporting Goods here in Columbia has been outfitting teams, officials, and anybody else from T-ball to college for 50-plus years. Be sure and check them out at 931-388-8060 or online at jonesandlang.com. Jones & Lang Sporting Goods, the look of a winner.
Zion Christian Academy at zioneagles.org or 931-388-7531. You can schedule your appointment to visit their beautiful campus. Again, zioneagles.org or 931-7531 to schedule your visit today.
Is your internet slowing you down? It's time for an upgrade. Whether you're at home, working from your home office, or at your business, it's time to unleash the speed you need with speeds up to 1 gig at CPWS for as low as $70 a month. Give us a call, 931-375-7777. Local service, local support, CPWS.
Piggly Wiggly, located in Neely's Mill Shopping Center, is Columbia's locally owned and operated Cost Plus 10 grocery store dedicated to serving the community with low prices and smiling faces. Piggly Wiggly offers fresh, hand-cut meats daily as well as daily hot plate lunches from their deli counter. You're certain to see smiling faces and a helping hand when you're here at Piggly Wiggly. Come by and check out our fresh produce, high-quality meats, and more. Down home, down the street, we'll see you at the Pig.
Welcome back into the second hour here of a Wild and Wacky Wednesday here on Main Street Sports Today, presented by the Tennessee Orthopedic Alliance of Columbia. I'm David Wilson. That is Calvin White, repping the A up in Clarksville. Time to jump into the latest edition of the Grab Bag as we talk some news and notes across the world of sports. And we're going to continue really quickly with some baseball news. We got a couple baseball notes in this segment. Mark, I'm going to start with the managers and GMs on the move that we left off from our chatter segment. And Calvin, there was obviously a team on here that you and I and Mo have of interest. And it's Buster Olney who did this report for ESPN, talking about some managers and GMs that could potentially be on the move or needing replacements this offseason. And of course, the top of the list is the Braves and current manager Brian Snicker, um, who could retire obviously at the end of the season, but he only mentioned the Braves job as one of the highly coveted jobs that could become available this offseason in the world of Major League Baseball. He mentions the core of the aforementioned on this show, Ronald Acuna Jr., Matt Olson, Chris Sale, Hurston Waldrop is somebody who's emerged as a rookie, and the long-term stability of this franchise. Some names he mentioned in regard to the Braves job, Calvin, were current bench coach Walt Weiss, former Cubs manager, also former Brave, David Ross, another former Brave and MLB analyst, Mark DeRosa, and Skip Schumacher, who won the 2022 National League Coach of the Year, or Manager of the Year, excuse me, with the Marlins, who's working in the Rangers front office. So I know those are just some names right there, Calvin, but give me your thoughts on that crew.
Yeah, I think that David Ross had, or he's had some good years with the Cubs ever since they hired him. Obviously, they're having a really good year this year. They've been one of the best teams, not only in the National League but in all of baseball. Mark DeRosa, Skip Schumacher, they've all had all those guys. Well, DeRosa and Schumacher, they've had really good tenures as major league managers. I think that if Brian Snitker does decide to retire, the Braves are going to find somebody that has a history of being a successful major league manager. Obviously, David Ross doesn't have the managerial background that Mark DeRosa and Skip Schumacher do, but there's been a lot of people that have their opinions on Brian Snitker. It seems like you either love him or you hate him. But he's been the Braves manager for a long time, and obviously, like you said, if he does decide to retire, whoever ends up being the next manager is going to have a really good core to hopefully rebuild or not rebuild, but rebound for next year and try to get the Braves back into the playoffs.
Yeah, Mark, no need to scroll through this as I list these next names. Obviously, below Brian Snicker has mentioned Bruce Bochy of the Texas Rangers, who's in a very similar spot to Snicker age wise. They will both be 70 by the year's end. Obviously, with Skip Schumacher working in the Rangers front office under Chris Young, there's this assumption that he could potentially take over in the manager's dugout for the Rangers, who won the World Series a couple of years ago with Bruce Bochy. Maybe not having the season that they wanted with the talent that they have on the roster. Also mentioned in this is Rocco Baldelli of the Minnesota Twins, who have had a disappointing season. Obviously, Los Angeles Angels manager and former Braves third base coach Ron Washington is also mentioned, who's on medical leave after having quadruple bypass surgery this season. Just his health is something that would be mentioned, and that tidbit mentioned by only Albert Pujols, the former uh, Cardinals first baseman, former player for the Los Angeles Angels, and obviously a future Hall of Famer. Um, Listed as a potential manager. He spent some time in the Dominican League as a manager. Also mentioned Torey Lovello of the Arizona Diamondbacks and Rob Thompson of the Phillies, who lead the NL East standings. But he's going to be on the hot seat if the Phillies do not make some noise in the postseason. Also mentioned here Bob Melvin of the San Francisco Giants and Oliver Marmol of the St. Louis Cardinals. All guys that potentially could find themselves either not retained by their organization or on the hot seat this offseason as the season ends here in a couple weeks. Moving into some news and notes. Actually, really quickly, Mark, I'm going to just stick with the Major League Baseball theme. I know I'm going out of order, so I apologize. Anthony Rizzo, former Cub with the aforementioned Chicago Cubs that Calvin mentioned earlier, has retired after 14 seasons in Major League Baseball. Also spent some time originally with the San Diego Padres and the New York Yankees, a world champion. Helped the Cubs break the curse in that World Series that went down to a Game 7 with them and the Cleveland Indians at the time. So, Calvin, really quickly, give me your thoughts as one of the good ones of the game, Anthony Rizzo. I've never heard a bad word said about him from any of the players. So, one of the good guys in baseball, hanging up his cleats.
Yeah, he's obviously not as good as Ernie Banks, but Anthony Rizzo was kind of the modern day Mr. Cub. He was that guy that during those years where um, the Cubs were good and making the playoffs, and even when they won the World Series, to break the streak that at the time was the longest championship drought in American sports. He was kind of the guy that you associated with the Cubs. He was already there for a couple years when they had before they got a young Chris Bryant who ended up winning the MVP, Kyle Schwarber, who we mentioned earlier. But he's just been one of the faces of the Cubs and of baseball for most of the last decade. Like you said, I've never heard somebody say a bad word about Anthony Rizzo. I watched his retirement video he posted this morning. He was talking about how he has more time to, contribute to his charity that he owns and stuff like that. So um, he was still a really good player. He had some good seasons for the Yankees, but another one of the good ones is retiring.
Yeah, Rizzo's 242 home runs with the Cubs are the sixth most in franchise history behind Sammy Sosa, Ernie Banks, Billy Williams, Ron Santo, and Ryan Sandberg. Rest in peace to Ryan Sandberg. We lost him just earlier this year. As you mentioned, helped break the streak. 108-year championship drought by winning the World Series with the Cubs. That postseason, he batted 277 with 3 home runs, including a blast off Clayton Kershaw in Game 6 of the NLCS. It had 10 RBIs in that postseason. So one of the good ones, once again, I'm stepping away from baseball. So congrats to Anthony Rizzo, one of the good guys in Major League Baseball, on his retirement. Wishing him well. To the world of the NFL, this came out last night with my Green Bay Packers. Christian Watson tore his ACL last season at the end of the year, but they are rewarding him and helping him kind of give him some motivation to get through his rehab process as he looks to come back at the end of the season. The Packers are signing the wide receiver, the former second-round pick, to a one-year, $13.25 million contract extension, according to ESPN's Adam Schefter. He is on the physically unable to perform list after suffering that ACL injury last year in Week 18 in the final game of the regular season against the Chicago Bears. He's the 34th overall pick in the 2022 NFL Draft. Last year, caught 29 passes for a career high 620 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's tallied 14 touchdowns over his first 3 professional seasons. He's another guy of that youthful Green Bay core that includes now first round pick Matthew Golden, Romeo Dobbs. The Packers offense, including with running back Josh Jacobs, tight end Tucker Kraft, and obviously a young quarterback in Jordan Love. There's a lot of pieces to like about that Packers offense, and now you add obviously Micah Parsons to the defense. So the Packers, really one of the most talented teams in the NFL.
Yeah, and Christian Watson has been one of those guys that has been a big help to Jordan Love, kind of easing Jordan Love into that starting quarterback spot over the last couple of years. And last year Packers finished 11-6. Most years that would finish, near the top of the NFC North, but the Lions and the Vikings were 2 of the best teams in the NFL last year. So obviously, like you said, locked up Christian Watson for another season. And with the addition of Micah Parsons, Packers looking to have another really good season and get back into the playoffs and chasing Super Bowls like they're used to over the history of that franchise.
Yeah, we'll see how this ACL injury and the recovery impacts him. Obviously, Christian Watson is a speed deep threat, so we'll see how that affects him. That is an element that the Packers need, obviously, in their offense. With Jaden Reed, Matthew Golden, and Christian Watson, you feel really good. Obviously, with Romeo Dobbs being a possession receiver, you feel really good about that foursome, if healthy, helping out Jordan Love. So the Packers play the Commanders tomorrow night on Thursday Night Football at Lambeau. It is a whiteout for Green Bay. So looking forward to watching that one as Jaden Daniels and the crew take on Jordan Love, 2 of the battles between 2 of the young quarterbacks in the NFL. In the world of college football, as we head into the 3rd week of the season, this week for most teams, got a couple ranked matchups on the docket. And for Illinois, who finds itself as a top 10 team for the first time in forever. Businessman Larry Guys has made a $100 million donation to their athletic department and will give the Fighting Illini football stadium renamed in his family's honor. I guess that's what $100 million can do for you. It is the largest donation in Illinois athletic history. Is believed to be one of the biggest ever in college football history. We talked on this show with Calvin and I about Kansas receiving a $300 million gift to its football stadium. Well, now Illinois, also in triple digits with $100 million going to its football program, Calvin.
Yeah, I wish I had $100 million to just give away. But like you said, Illinois.
Nice.
Yeah, Illinois having a really good. They're ranked in the top 10. I'm sure a lot of people aren't used to seeing Illinois football ranked period, much less in the top 10. And obviously, in this day and age of college athletics, money talks, and hopefully that $100 million can go toward NIL and their stadium and all those type of things to hope to do what they hope to do what they hope it will do, and keep Illinois football competitive for a long time.
Yep, Calvin, we mentioned this also in our top story, also mentioned it on the rundown. The Las Vegas Aces, they're women, sorry, not lady, the Las Vegas Aces kept it rolling last night. They have now won 15 in a row after defeating the Chicago Sky last night, 92-61. They were all over the Sky. Jewel Lloyd made some history for the Aces last night. She became the 16th player in WNBA history to reach 6,000 points. She scored 15 in that one. Las Vegas has clearly put itself in that second seed in the WNBA playoffs that we went over in the top story. That they will clinch that seeding and home court advantage through at least the semifinals. If they win on Thursday at the Los Angeles Sparks, or Atlanta loses at the Connecticut Sun. Las Vegas owns the tiebreaker over the Dream. The Las Vegas franchise record winning streak tied the 1998 Houston Comets for third longest. The 2001 Los Angeles Sparks own the record for the WNBA at 18 games in a row. In 2014, the Phoenix Mercury won 16 in a row. Last night, Jackie Young added 15 points for the Aces, and obviously Asia Wilson has played like an MVP candidate for Las Vegas and head coach Becky Hammond. So the Aces keeping it rolling in the W.
Yeah, like we talked at the beginning of the show, it's going to be really entertaining WNBA playoffs. The Aces have been one of the better teams in the WNBA over the last couple of years with, Asia Wilson, Jewel Lloyd, Jackie Young. They've got some star power, and, they've obviously turned it on, winning 15 in a row after they got out to a slow start to the year. Asia Wilson is probably going to be the MVP again. And, it's going to be a really entertaining WNBA playoffs, especially with as hot as the Aces are right now. Maybe they can come out of that 2 spot and win another WNBA championship.
Couldn't agree with you more on that one. So that'll kind of wrap right there. Our latest edition of Jumping into the Grab Bag here on Main Street Sports Today. Coming up after the break, another interesting and exciting topic. NASCAR as it comes to Tennessee, as the round of 16 concludes on Sunday night in the Bass Pro night race at Bristol Motor Speedway. Heather Williams will be on site this weekend with all the coverage, and she'll be joining us here next on Main Street Sports Today. So stay with us as Heather joins us for her weekly NASCAR segment.
Deep in a forest at Nashville Zoo, new creatures here for you to view. Phantoms graced in black and white swing high in trees of dappled light. In rocky crags, tall and steep, small antelopes with nimble feet. A wise old man with beard of white, a sentry perched on stony height. Amidst it all, a hunter lies, with coat of gold and steely eyes. A new adventure just for you. Leopard Forest at Nashville Zoo. Open now.
Jones and Lang Sporting Goods here in Columbia has been outfitting teams, officials, and anybody else from T-ball to college for 50 plus years. Be sure and check them out at 931-388-8060 or online at jonesandlang.com. Jones and Lang Sporting Goods, the look of a winner.
Piggly Wiggly, located in Neely's Mill Shopping Center, is Columbia's locally owned and operated Cost Plus 10 grocery store dedicated to serving the community with low prices and smiling faces. Piggly Wiggly offers fresh, hand-cut meats daily, as well as daily hot plate lunches from their deli counter. You're certain to see smiling faces and a helping hand when you're here at Piggly Wiggly. Come by and check out our fresh produce, high-quality meats, and more. Down home, down the street, we'll see you at the Pig.
Welcome back into Wild and Wacky Wednesday here on Main Street Sports Day, presented by the Tennessee Orthopedic Alliance of Columbia. I'm David Wilson. That is Calvin White. Just wait a couple seconds here as we wait on our good friend Heather Williams from WYCB TV out of Johnson City to join us to talk a little NASCAR as the NASCAR Cup Series heads to the high banks of Bristol Motor Speedway, Thunder Valley, this Sunday night. As the round of 16 concludes on the NASCAR Cup Series playoff schedule, and the round of 12 gets its final contestants and drivers. Calvin, looking forward to having Heather on. A couple years ago, there's a poll out. What race excited you most on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule? And there's a lot of, obviously, crown jewels on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule. You have the Daytona 500, you have the Brickyard 400 here. But Bristol in the night race was by far the NASCAR fans' favorite. And so looking forward to talking to Heather here as she joins us now via audio to discuss the upcoming night race at Bristol. Heather, how you doing?
Hey, guys. Couldn't figure out how to get
How you doing,
unmuted
Heather?
there. You got me?
No, you're good. I got you now. Heather, before we talk a little Bristol, I know something that you're excited about this weekend as the NASCAR Cup Series playoffs in the round of 16 heads to the high banks of Thunder Valley. Let's wrap up last weekend in the second race of the round of 16 up at Gateway at Worldwide Technology Raceway in the greater St. Louis area. And it was Denny Hamlin picking up a historic win for Team Toyota, capturing the 200th career win for Toyota and booking his place in a round of 12. Obviously, Denny Hamlin picked up his 59th career win, one shy of 60, a couple shy of Kyle Busch for the all-time mark of the current drivers. Just kind of talk about what you saw from Denny Hamlin this past weekend as he dominated his way to victory lane.
A determined driver for sure. Like he's determined to get to 60 wins. He's one away. He's said repeatedly that that's his goal, not a championship. He wants to get to 60. I think he gets there. He might even get there this year, but it was really surprising that Gateway of all places would be where he get his first playoff win this year, because I mean, that's not, they haven't been around in the Cup Series for very long at Gateway, but it's traditionally been a Ford track. It's been a track where the Fords really dominated and flexed their muscle. But once again, it was the Toyotas. The Toyotas look like they are serious about a championship this year.
Yeah, and he said it in his post-race interview at the victory, I guess, at the start-finish line when he was talked to by NBC. He said you can either get on the bandwagon or you can get run over by it. Obviously, he's accepted kind of this villain mantra per se that Kyle Busch used to have. NASCAR always needs to have a bad guy, and it seems like Denny Hamlin is being that, and he kind of lives up to that reputation of he's willing to take on that persona, Heather.
Yeah, he's definitely the heel as it was right now for NASCAR, and he's perfectly fine with that. Drives for Toyota, has a driver that's not perceived as one of the more popular drivers in the garage area driving for him, and Denny himself has got a little edge to him. So, yeah, he's perfectly happy with that.
Yeah, we've seen this now as we look at the Cup Series standings as they head to Bristol this weekend into your neck of the woods. There's some separation. Obviously, Denny Hamlin and Chase Briscoe have punched their tickets to the round of 12. Kyle Larson plus 60, Bubba Wallace plus 50, Brian Blaney plus 42. Those guys have to feel really good about pointing their way in by end of the first stage or second stage at Bristol. Looking at the cutoff line, The final two spots, Ross Chastain plus 19 and Austin Cindric plus 11. On the outside looking in, it's Austin Dillon minus 11, SVG minus 15, and Alex Bowman and Josh Berry minus 35 and 45 respectively, almost looking like must wins right there. Just kind of give me your quick thoughts on the Cup Series playoffs standings as we head to Bristol.
Yeah, normally you think of Bristol as a little bit of a wild card or a place where you might have car issues or mechanical failures that might affect it. But the last couple of years, the playoff race here at Bristol has actually been pretty quiet. Last year, the entire final stage was run without a caution. So if you're SVG or Alex Bowman or Josh Berry, you're concerned because you're really going to have to probably win, even though statistically and points wise you're not out of it. There's probably not going to be enough guys in front of you to have trouble that you could run 10th and get into the playoffs, into the next round of the playoffs. So that's kind of the mindset they're going to have to take going into this final race of the first round.
Yeah, Heather, as we move to Bristol this weekend, obviously we ran it earlier on the schedule. Much different weather, much different conditions. Give me your thoughts on some drivers that you're looking forward to seeing that can be in contention to get to victory lane.
Well, I mean, for the past 2+ years, whenever we've come to Bristol, there's really only been two drivers that have even been a factor in the race, and that's been Kyle Larson and Denny Hamlin. So I think you have to look at them, particularly Kyle, because even though he's already clinched on points into the next round, you just feel like from a psychological standpoint, as well as the Toyotas are running, that he really feels like he needs to get a win, to kind of announce himself as a contender for the championship, just based on the way they're running. So definitely look at those guys, start and pretty much end every conversation about Bristol with them. One of the biggest storylines, though, to watch as we head into the weekend is the tires. You guys, probably remember that 2 years ago, in the spring, they the tire issues, if you will, with the wear and the fall off, and then in the fall everything was normal, and then this past spring, it looked like we were going to have the tire issues again in practice, and then when the race came, it was normal again. So I think NASCAR wants that softer tire in that fall off. They're bringing a little bit different right side tire than they had in the spring to kind of encourage that, because it definitely helps with the passing and kind of makes people have to use different strategies, which they definitely want. So I think the tires more than the drivers, and how the drivers adapt to that softer right side is the big story.
Yeah, and Heather, kind of elaborating on that and continuing, a guy who cut his teeth on the short track ranks is Josh Berry, who finds himself in a must-win situation pretty much heading to Bristol this weekend. Don't you feel kind of that managing tires, managing your equipment kind of falls into his ballpark where he could potentially find himself maybe in contention this weekend?
Absolutely. And Bristol's a really good track for him. He's run here ever since the first time he came here in the Cup Series in the Stuart Haas car. So I definitely think that he's a guy to watch, and he could definitely, if he can find some way to get around those two big guns that we talked about, he's one of those guys in that next group of contenders that could come into Bristol and get a win potentially and steal a place in the second round of the playoffs.
Last NASCAR question for me, Heather, as before I toss it to Calvin and wants to talk a little ETSU football. We mentioned a couple weeks ago talking about SVG going into the playoffs, potentially if he could make his way through the round of 16 with the Charlotte Roval being on the schedule, potentially making some noise in the playoffs, and that just has not kind of presented itself the first two races at Darlington, where he really struggled, and Gateway as well. Obviously, he's still learning the ovals, cutting his teeth on that. Would you say it's kind of disappointing though, with the playoff bonus points he had and the wins he had going into the playoffs, for him to exit the round of 16?
Well, he's not out yet. And when I talked to him at Playoff Media Week a few weeks ago, or Playoff Media Day a few weeks ago, he talked about how when it came to the ovals, the places he was the most comfortable were the short tracks. So we have a short track coming up this week. We'll see how he does. Darlington is tough on everyone. I mean, not just SVG struggled at Darlington. So I don't necessarily think you can hold that against him. And he is still learning. Is it disappointing? Maybe, but I don't know anyone that picked him to come out of the first round. I don't know anyone that picked that. So I think, this has been a good learning experience for him. I think he is getting stronger on the ovals. And I think his day will come where he will be a major contender in the postseason. It's hard for almost anyone to go in the first year that they make the playoffs and immediately be a playoff contender. So he'll learn from it, and I think he'll be a serious threat in a couple of years.
Heather, switching gears a little bit, like David said, over to ETSU football. We talked last week, kind of talking about their upcoming matchup, traveling to Knoxville to play Tennessee. They ended up losing 72-17. Now, obviously, I think everybody would agree that Tennessee is and was the more talented football team. But, were there anything positive that ETSU can kind of take away from this game?
Well, I asked Coach Will Healy that question after the game. Realistically, I don't think there were many people that thought that ETSU was going to go in there and win that game, right? I think the disappointment came in the fact that they were never even competitive from the start. And given the experience of that team, the talent of this team, the way the season that they had last year, the transfers they had coming in, they were on their heels from the very beginning. They got smacked in the mouth and they didn't respond. So I think, his answer was, and the answer of Cade McNamara, one of their two starting quarterbacks that I talked to after the game was, we'll find out if there's a positive based on how practice goes this week. How do they respond? How do they bond together? How do they fix the things? So they react better when you get smacked in the mouth early. So I think, the positive will be they're going to find out how this team deals with adversity and if they can deal with adversity. And I think they can. I've known Coach Healy for a long time. I've known him since he was 15 years old, covered him in high school. They've learned that they're probably not as good as they thought they were going into the season, but I think they've also learned that they can get there by the end of the season. So this week's game with West Georgia is going to be crucial for them because that's a really good FCS football team that they're getting ready to play, and it'll be a better measure of who they are in their own level of competition.
Yeah, you mentioned it. They're traveling to West Georgia, who's number 25 in the FCS poll right now. Obviously, I got to look at West Georgia last year when Austin Peay played them over here in Clarksville. But you got into it a little bit. What does a bounce back week, look like for ETSU? Because, you kind of mentioned, right now they're still trying to find their own identity and things like that. Obviously trying to fix things in practice after last week. But what does a bounce back week look like, especially against a really tough FCS team like West Georgia, like you said?
Well, I think they expect to win this game. They were ranked in the FCS polls before they got hammered by Tennessee. And I don't know that any unless you go in and beat an FBS team, I don't know that those games really tell you what you're going to be against your own level of competition. So I think there's still a potential that ETSU could be a ranked team and a really good team in their own right. But we'll find out this week for sure where they stand. Those two starting quarterbacks they have are both so very talented, and they've got to find a way to really get the offense to roll through both of them. And then their running backs, they're as deep at running back as maybe any other FCS school. So they just got to find a way to get all those talented guys involved in the offense without breaking up the flow of the offense. I think that's the biggest key for them offensively. And then on defense, they've got to hammer down. They were clearly out-talented by Tennessee in the skill positions, but I feel like having seen them play, their game this year in practice, and then the guys that were here last year, they are far better than what they showed against Tennessee.
And, the answer to this one might be a little self-explanatory because you got into it a little bit. But last week we were talking about how Cade McNamara and Jacoby Criswell are two guys that have played power conference football, and you mentioned how they wouldn't be intimidated going into an environment like Tennessee. But you mentioned how they were upset that they were never competitive from the start, and never found a way to bounce back. But just from what you saw, how did Cade McNamara and Jacoby Criswell handle that environment? Obviously, those were the two guys that played most of the game. Jackson Bird came in and threw one pass, but just from what you saw, how did those two guys handle that environment?
I mean, I think they handled the environment fine, but they're just one guy out of 11 when they're out there. I mean, you talk to Cade McNamara after the game, and I mean, he played at Michigan. This is not really anything new for him. But, how do you the really great quarterbacks that I think, this is probably, I mean, not to be mean, but probably part of the reason why they've ended up at ETSU, can elevate the people around them. You look at Patrick Mahomes, right? The Chiefs had no business being in that game on Friday night because the team was just playing terrible. But he put the team on his back, and they had a chance, to be competitive in that game. And I think that's what those two have got to find. When the other guys are playing around them, how do you put them on their back? How do you carry them? Because it's one thing for them to not be intimidated and to play well and to make all the throws, but when you're as talented as they are on this level, you have to elevate the people around you.
Heather, one last question really quickly on ETSU before we let you go. Appreciate you joining us here once again. A couple weeks ago it was mentioned, obviously, and announced that Tennessee Tech is going to be joining the SoCon here next year. Just what's the word on the ground up in Johnson City about the excitement of another in-state institution joining a conference with ETSU and the SoCon?
I mean, I think they definitely like it when it comes to travel. They're not really like a traditional rival of ETSU. They don't play a lot in a lot of sports. So I don't know that there's like that excitement or anticipation. I mean, they've played, in recent memory, they've played Austin Peay more than they've played Tennessee Tech. So, I think, from just the standpoint of now you have 4 games really of teams that are less than 2 hours, 2 or 3 hours in a direction, in Chat and Western Carolina and Wofford and now Tennessee Tech, and really Furman's not that far either. Just from a travel standpoint alone, that just makes things so much easier, right? So I think that from that perspective, they're excited. I think it has the potential to be a really great rivalry just because of the proximity, between Tech and Chattanooga and ETSU. I think that could be a fun little triangle there. So I think everything's pretty positive, but there's just really not a ton of tradition. I think there's probably more tradition between Tech and Chattanooga than Tech and ETSU, but it'll be fun to see how they fit into the conference for sure.
Yeah, it's going to be fun this weekend for sure as the night race at Bristol takes place on Sunday night at 7:30 Eastern Time. Should be a good one, Heather. You can follow her on X at sports_Heather. We'll show all of your news and notes from Bristol. Heather, enjoy that weekend. Should be a wild and wacky one. It always seems like when the lights get turned on, that those boys get it going. So looking forward to seeing your coverage this weekend at Bristol.
Thanks for sticking with me, guys. I'm at Happy Valley football practice at the moment. They got a big game against Hampton, 3-0 versus 3-0. So
there you go. Well, we appreciate you making it work. Heather.
Yep. Thanks, guys.
All right. That is Heather Williams, WCYB Sports, joining us here for our weekly NASCAR segment and ETSU segment here on Main Street Sports Today, presented by the Tennessee Orthopedic Alliance of Columbia. Coming up after the break, you have waited for an hour and 40 minutes. So now it's time. Calvin has searched the web to find the wildest and wacky stories from across the globe, and those are coming to you next. So stay with us here as we enter our final segment of the show. It is Wild and Wacky segment on a Wild and Wacky Wednesday, and we bring that right after this on Main Street Sports Today.
Being in Tennessee, we wanted to try to keep it as local as possible, so we have an entire section of our menu that is just dedicated to local whiskeys like Uncle Nearest, Jack Daniels, of course, George Dickel, Nelson Brothers, Greenbrier whiskey, and all of our taps are all local. From 2 o'clock until midnight, we've got food every day for you guys. A good handful of appetizers, some entrees, and a couple salads and things like that. My name is Ethan Kanata. Please come down and see us at the Pick Lobby Bar here at the Omni in Nashville.
At Delta Dental of Tennessee, we know our success begins and ends with providing superior quality service, and that includes serving those who need it most. This year, we're celebrating 25 years of giving back to the community we call home. Delta Dental, along with our Smile 180 Foundation, supports Tennessee's dental colleges and oral health education, children's hospitals, free and reduced cost dental clinics, and other like-minded charities. Here's to the next 25 plus years of ensuring healthy smiles.
There's a line that links us all. Most of the time, we don't even think about it, but it's everywhere. Illuminating our neighborhoods, empowering our businesses, and helping us to recharge. Whether it comes from our grids, the sun, or a kind heart, we believe in the power of good energy. And as your family and region continue to grow, you can trust that we'll always be there for you. Middle Tennessee Electric, bringing good energy.
Final segment on a Wednesday. Welcome back in to Main Street Sports Today, presented by the Tennessee Orthopedic Alliance of Columbia. David Wilson. That is my buddy Calvin White. You have waited patiently. It's the only segment they care about, Calvin, on a Wednesday. It is the Wild and Wacky segment here, as Calvin has searched the web for all the wild and wacky stories from across the globe. Without further ado, I'm going to turn over the baton to one, Calvin White, as he gives us those stories. Go ahead, Calvin.
Yeah, for our first wild and wacky story, we're going to revisit our main man, David Rush. We have him on here at least once or twice every week. It seems like he's the guy that we talk about. He holds over 180 Guinness World Records. And the one we're going to talk about this week, he spit a ping pong ball at a wall 51 times in 30 seconds. This is another one of those weird records that you just have to kind of seek out and figure out that it's a record. It says he originally set the record at 43 bounces and bested his own title in 2024 with 47 bounces at the Guinness World Record headquarters in London. He managed to break the record for a third time with 51 bounces on day 5 of his cruise. And then there's a quote from him. It says, "To the casual eye, it might look goofy, but trust me, this record is deceptively difficult. The spit has to be perfectly aimed. Too much pressure and the ball rockets back higher than expected. Too little and it drops low and slows you down. Every bounce is a split-second calculation, pressure, angle, and timing." So this does not look like the most glamorous of things, but I guess to someone who's just chasing world records, it looked kind of appealing.
I can respect the craft. I mean, he made it sound like he was an athlete. I mean, it is pretty athletic, though. You like the speed, the timing, all that to be able to catch and do these things. I can understand it. I assume in this video, Calvin, he's spitting the ball at the glass and it bounces back and he catches it in his mouth and then spits it right back out again, like going back and forth. That's what I'm picturing when I heard you elaborate on what was said. So I'm just making sure I understand his game and I can respect it even further.
Yeah, I believe that's what's happening here. And after I read it, that does kind of make it more impressive instead of just, spitting one at the wall and then just reloading a different one in your mouth and spitting it at the wall. So that does make it a little bit more impressive.
So the in 30 seconds, the time it takes to not only spit it and get it back, but to catch it and then to do it again consecutively. Now that is impressive. I feel like a lot of people could, maybe spit it back at the glass and catch it in their mouth, but the time it takes for them to, catch it per se and to, dislodge it back again could take some time. So I mean, I respect it. And as you mentioned, he has the middle name Record Breaker for a reason. So this is a guy that spends a lot of time scouring the Guinness World Book of Records to do something like this. So I respect the game. Like I said, it might necessarily be something that you and I try to attempt to feat and to do, but David does, and so he owns quite a bit of these. So he continues to get better. You mentioned how he's kind of one-upped himself each time he's tried. So I wonder what physically is like the max. I mean, 30 seconds. It's a short time, but it's not a long time. I mean, how do I say that? It's not short, but it's not long either. Like, as a runner, if you're running, if you're a cross country track runner, 30 seconds is a long time. If you beat somebody by 30 seconds as a race, that's a long time. But when it comes like this, 30 seconds is really short. I guess that's sort of what I was trying to say. So, um, you only can do so much physically in 30 seconds with something like that. So 51 might be the max.
Yeah, and you've got to have some velocity on that spit too to try to get it to bounce off the wall at a high enough angle to catch it back in your mouth. But that is his 181st, or he has more than 181 Guinness Book of World Records. Oh, Mark has a video for us here.
There's the video that answers my question. I mean,
Yeah,
that's impressive.
That's impressive.
Yeah, like I mean, most of these are like it's silly and I would never do that. That's honestly impressive. And I mean, the distance that he's getting and how quickly he's going back and forth. I respect the game. I do.
Yeah.
No hate here. No hate.
So that'll do it for our weekly David Rush wild and wacky story. Moving on to our next one. This is probably up there for one of the wilder ones we've had. The headline reads, "Biker uses mouth to hold handlebar during nearly 1,000-foot wheelie." A Saudi Arabian motorcyclist performed a nearly 1,000-foot wheelie while holding a handlebar in his mouth to break a Guinness World Record. Ahmed Ottman clamped his jaws around a handlebar of his motorcycle to keep the vehicle steady during his wheelie on July 15th. He managed to ride in this position for 984 feet and 3 inches, officially breaking the Guinness World Record for the greatest distance motorcycle wheelie held by mouth. Now, I don't know how or why the Guinness Book of World Records comes up with a record called greatest distance motorcycle wheelie held by mouth. I'm also more impressed that someone figured out that was a record and decided that they wanted to try and break it.
I'm telling you, they just come up with records for like every little single thing that you could possibly do. They put it in the book. The danger level. I mean, goodness gracious, like I couldn't imagine. I mean, it's impressive, and I'll tip my cap and give my respect game. But like one, motorcycles are dangerous. I've seen too many accidents with them for me to ever get on one per se, to let alone put the handle the stick in my mouth. Um, one bad thing and that could go ugly very very quickly. So credit to him, but that's not something that you will ever see David Wilson try to do whatsoever.
No, and I guess with him holding it with his mouth, that kind of prevented him from going super fast. But at the same time, that's also got to hurt your jaw at least a little bit.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like I couldn't imagine doing that. Like I don't know what else I need to say about that. Like Mark says, I want to see him break with his mouth. I wouldn't put anything like that in my mouth. Like, I mean, I would barely ride it the way he is right now, pictured with me sitting down. Like, I'd probably flip that over. So for me to, be able to tilt it up and to have one of them in my mouth, no, can't do that. No, not talented enough.
Says his wheelie lasted for just under a minute, so he went 984 feet and 3 inches in just under a minute and somehow didn't wreck the motorcycle. So that's probably the most impressive part of this record. Moving on to our next wild and wacky topic. This headline reads, Spanish man breaks record for fastest backward 100 meters in heels. A serial Guinness World Record breaker from Spain defeated one of his own titles by running 328 feet backwards in 16.55 seconds while wearing high heels. Christian Roberto Lopez Rodriguez broke the record for the fastest 100-meter backwards. Yeah, broke the record for the fastest 100-meter backwards in high heels, which he previously set at 20 and a half seconds during an appearance on Spanish TV. The record-keeping organization's rules for the record required Rodriguez's shoes to have heels of at least 2.76 inches and be no wider than 0.59 inches at the tip. He currently holds more than 80 Guinness World Record titles. And he's got a bunch of records for running certain distances in different types of shoes. He's got the fastest 400 meter in clogs, the fastest 100 meter wearing flip flops, the fastest mile traveled while balancing a pool cue on a finger, the fastest 100 meters on a space hopper, the fastest 100 meters carrying an egg on a spoon in the mouth, and the fastest 50 meters backwards wearing swim fins. So this guy loves his racing records.
I mean, first of all, look at the definition on the calves, the thighs, the hamstring. Like, I can respect that now. Like, I wish I was that chiseled, but the feet that he's doing, I mean, I'm not going anywhere wearing heels, man. Not doing it. Just not doing it. I'm just not doing it. You said he raced backwards, correct?
Yes.
Uphill. That's a
Looks that way.
safety. Like, my stuff would be tore. I would tear something. My luck. I can barely do right Calvin without walking straight normally and not tripping over my own feet. So let alone going backwards up a hill with some heels on, it'd be done for me. I'd be walking around, or y'all be pushing me around in a wheelchair.
And that's also gotta, like, if it doesn't hurt his feet while doing it, it's gotta definitely hurt his feet after.
He's feeling the burn in them calves and them thighs and them hamstrings, which look like that's how they're so defined right now. It's because he's been working them out doing that.
Yeah, he's got just what they have listed on the website. He's got at least 4 or 5 different records for some sort of running, jogging with a weird object. So he definitely loves his running. Like you pointed out, the definition in that man's legs. So kudos to him for searching out all these records and going on this quest like our man David Rush to break as many as he can. Mark, I'm going to go out of order here. I'm going to go. This one reads: Barefoot woman breaks record for running across Lego bricks. A New Zealand woman showed the strength of her soles when she ran barefoot over 100 meters of loose Lego bricks in 24.75 seconds.
We suffer more.
Gabrielle Wall broke the Guinness World Record for the fastest 100 meters barefoot on Lego bricks when she attempted the 328-foot sprint in Christchurch. The track was covered in 661 pounds of Lego bricks donated by Imagination Station, a New Zealand nonprofit that uses Lego pieces for robotics and mechanics education. Mark's got a video pulled up for us here. So she just does a dead sprint over these Legos.
Wouldn't call it a sprint. No, I'm kidding. That's me. I mean, goodness, like that hurts. I just no.
It hurts bad enough to step on one.
We've yes, and we've all stubbed our toe before. I mean, look, I guess she's just gritting through it and running. She probably didn't feel it all to that moment when she was shaking her head at the end when she crossed the line. But that's a lot of Legos. Goodness, to fill up a whole like lane's width, and man, that's ouch.
Yeah, she
Goodness.
says I am proud to have pushed myself to new limits. She says she has probably stepped on the plastic bricks more times than she can count. It says in our video, Gabrielle is wearing sunglasses, presumably to hide her tears from the pain of standing on all that Lego. That's truth. That's probably the truest thing they put in here.
It's accurate, very, very, very accurate. I would have been hiding my tears too, and I would have probably veered off at one point. But nonetheless, here we are.
Says Wall said she is considering attempting more Lego-based Guinness World Records, but for building rather than running. So it looks like she learned her lesson. She's only going to run on the Legos one time.
Me too. I wouldn't do it one time. No times. Zero. Zilch.
0
Nada.
times. A singular loose one is bad enough.
There's no more Legos around here. We've aged out of that. So until children maybe one day pop in my life, no more Legos.
Yeah. So to close us out here on our final wild and wacky story, this headline reads: Trio of men use slingshot to make cornhole shot from 151 feet. A team of 3 men used a slingshot to launch a beanbag 151 feet at an Idaho football field to break the Guinness World Record for the longest cornhole shot with a slingshot. And Mark's got video for us here for this one.
I'll get in on this.
I think.
No, it's just still
no video, just a picture.
Just a picture. I get in on the cornhole now.
Oh yeah, it says Joel Strasser, Luke Lorick, and Garrett Smith said it took them multiple attempts at the Meridian Waters football field at Meridian High School before their beanbag landed neatly in the hole of the cornhole target. Strasser has multiple Guinness World Record titles to his name, mostly involving putting objects into his beard. He and Smith previously teamed up with fellow serial world record breaker David Rush to break the record for the most chopsticks put in a beard in 1 minute by a team of 2, managing 104. So this is another one of those guys that sets out to break these records. And honestly, getting the accuracy and the power down on that slingshot to land that bag in the hole is pretty impressive.
Yeah, that is really impressive. And so I respect the game, and I feel like Watertown back in the day, y'all had a lot of cornhole games.
We did.
Cornhole's a thing in Watertown. Yeah.
It is. We had we actually had a whole cornhole tournament during homecoming week. So
I'm telling you.
During homecoming week, they would shorten the classes, and we would get like 45 minutes at the end of the day to just go play cornhole.
Cornhole is a Southern thing, so I can respect the game and I can respect the feed. This is something that I would definitely get in on. Another hat tip to Calvin for doing what he loves best, and that's finding the wild and wacky stories. I don't know if he loves it, but it's part of his job detail on Wednesday mornings. That'll do it for another show here on the Wild and Wacky Wednesday, presented by the Tennessee Orthopedic Alliance of Columbia here on Main Street Sports Today. Calvin, he's done for the week. He's got some football on the docket this weekend. Looking forward to seeing what he does for Main Street, Clarksville, and for Main Street Preps. I'll be joined tomorrow by our good friend Mo Patton as he joins us on a Throwback Thursday as we get closer towards the weekend. I know Mo has some football on the docket tomorrow night, so he'll be ready to go. So see you tomorrow afternoon on a Thursday.